All right, first thing we're going to do before we open the hood is we're going to check the air intake, make sure it's clean from debris. There's no damage, no cracks to the fins. Next, I'll check this running light, marker light. There's no condensation, there's no cracks, there's no damage to it. Next, we're going to pop the hood. You want to reach up and find the handle in the center of the hood. You want to slowly open and wait for the safety chain to catch. First thing we checked under the hood is the wiring harness to the running light. It's properly mounted and secured. There's no broken wires, no frayed wires. It's insulated. It's mounted to the truck correctly. The headlight is properly mounted and secured. The bolts are tight. There's nothing missing. The wires are properly mounted and secured. The plug is properly mounted and secured, and there's no cut wires, frayed wires, and it's properly insulated. The other side of the plug is properly mounted and secured to the frame. There's no cut wires, frayed wires, and it's properly insulated. The tow hook is mounted and secured. There's no bolts missing. There's no non-factory wells. The windshield washer tank is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks. The wiring harness is properly mounted and secured. There's no frayed wires or cut wires, and it's properly insulated. The radiator is properly mounted to the truck. There's no bolts missing, no non-factory wells. I don't see any leaks on the side of the radiator. The bolts are secure. The reservoir has a sight glass with the appropriate amount of fluid in the reservoir. The cap is tight. The top radiator hose is mounted and secured. It is tight. There's no leaks, no bulging in the hose. The top hoses are mounted and secured. There's no leaks, no frays in the hose, no worn spots. The hose from the radiator is properly secured. There's no frays, no leaks. The bottom hose is properly secured. There's no frays, no leaks. The serpentine belt is properly mounted and secured. It has no more than 3/4 of an inch play. The fan is properly secured. The blades are not missing any bolts. There's no damage, no non-factory wells. The air compressor is a gear-driven compressor. It is properly mounted and secured. There's no bolts missing, no non-factory wells. The hoses are properly secured. There's no leaks. The air hoses are properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks and no non-factory wells. The wires are properly mounted and secured. There's no frays, no cuts, no broken wires. It's properly mounted. The wires are insulated. Fuel filter is properly mounted and secured. The wire is properly mounted and secured, and it's insulated. There's no cuts and no frays on the wires. The hoses are properly secured. There's no frays, cuts on the wires. There's no bolts missing in here. The wires are properly secured. There's no frays in the wires, and they're properly insulated. The windshield wiper motor is properly mounted and secured. There's no bolts missing. The wiring harness is properly mounted and secured. The plug is tight. There's no frayed or cut wires, and it's insulated. The arms are properly mounted and secured. The bushings are in place. They're properly mounted and secured, and there's no damage. The air hose is properly mounted and secured. There's no cuts, no frays in the hoses, no damage, and there's no leaks. The windshield washer hose is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks, no damage of any kind. The wiring harnesses here are properly mounted and secured with a proper cover. There's no damage, no cracks, no frays, no broken wires. I'm going to check the oil. This particular dipstick unscrews. Pull it out. Wipe it off. Stick it back in. And it has a proper level of oil in it. You want to secure the cap back so it doesn't come out. Next, we'll do the transmission fluid. It twists out. Wipe it clean. Put it back in. Pull it out, and it's at the proper level. I'm going to put it back in and lock it where it does not come out. Next, we'll do the steering shaft. We're going to check it here first and make sure there's no more than 2 inches of play or 10 degrees. It's properly mounted and secured. The U-joints are properly mounted and secured and properly lubricated. Power steering pump is properly mounted and secured. There's no bolts missing. There's no damage. There's no leaks. There's no non-factory wells. The hose for the power steering pump is properly mounted and secured. There's no damage, no leaks. The tank is properly mounted and secured. There's no damage, no leaks on the tank. This tank has a outside sight glass, and it also has a dipstick. The pitman arm is properly mounted and secured. It is tight with a proper nut and cotter pin. It's properly lubed. There's no bolts missing. The drag link is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks. There's no non-factory wells. It's properly lubricated. It's properly mounted with the correct nut and cotter pin. The brake chamber is properly mounted and secured. There's no dents, damage, leaks. The hose is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks, no frays, no damage. The slack adjuster is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks, no damage, no non-factory wells, and there's no more than 1 inch of play. The brake shoes have sufficient amount of pad on them. Inside, there's no bolts missing. Everything is properly secured. There's no leaks and properly lubricated. The inside of the wheel has no damage. There's no bends, cracks, non-factory wells. The inside of the tire has no damage, no bulges, no chunks missing, and is properly secured to the wheel. The shock is properly mounted and secured. There's no leaks, no excess dirt buildup or grime. The leaf springs are properly mounted to the axle with the U-bolts, and they're properly mounted to the hangers on each end and mounted to the frame. There's nothing missing from the leaf springs. There's no damage, no cracks, no bends, no non-factory wells. The tie rod is properly mounted with the correct nut and quarter pin. There's no leaks, has the proper lubrication. There's no damage, no non-factory welds. The top of the tire has no damage, no bolts, no nails stuck in the tire. There's no chunks missing from the tread, and it has more than 4/32 of an inch tread on the tire. The outside of the tire has no damage. There's no chunks missing. There's no bulges. And it has the proper air pressure. The inside of the wheel has no bends, no damage, no cracks, no non-factory welds. The valve stem has the proper PSI pressure with a metal cap. The inside of the wheel has no damage, no cracks, no bends, no non-factory welds. The lug nuts are tight. They're all secure. There's no rust or shiny marks on the threads. The inside of the hub looks secure. There's no bolts missing. There's no damage. Has the proper level of fluid. There's no non-factory welds on the wheel. On the closer view of the windshield, the gasket's properly attached. There's no damage to it. There's no dry rotting. On the closer view of the windshield, I see no cracks, no chips, and no damage. The windshield wiper is properly mounted. There's no damage to the arm. The hose is properly secured, and the windshield wiper has no dry rot and is properly secured to the wiper arm. The top radiator hose is mounted and secured. There's no leaks. There's no damage to the hose. The bottom hose is mounted and secured. There's no damage, no leaks. Down inside is the water pump. It is a belt-driven water pump. The hoses here are properly mounted and secured. There's no damage, there's no leaks, there's no frays. The air filter lid is properly mounted and secured. And the filter is in its proper place. The horn is properly mounted and secured, and the air horn and electrical wires are properly mounted and secured. There's no frays, no cuts, no damage. The antenna is properly mounted and secured and tight.